Hi, I'm Patrick Giguère with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who watches this channel, who likes, subscribes, comments, and shares the videos. I appreciate you. It's very helpful to the channel. It's very encouraging to me. If you're not yet a subscriber, I encourage you to do so. So let's get into it. I want to talk about the month of December today, the month of December 2022. Here we are at the end of the year. So, interesting month in its own way. They're all interesting. Just being on Earth at this point is just extremely interesting. It's very exciting. And I'm always telling people it's not as scary as it looks. There's a giant fear porn industry out there. And some of them like to call themselves the alternative media. But what they have in common with the mainstream, they're fear porn. It gets them clicks, sales, views, subscribers, likes, all that stuff. And if you're familiar with me, you know I really can't stand the truth movement. These people, they're like Asperger's kids, and they're just like, derp, dog, Satan, derp, Illuminati, derp. It's like everything is just very black and white, and it's never that simple, and they miss a lot of detail. One, the Illuminati probably hasn't existed really since the beginning of the 1800s, because the Illuminati proper that called themselves that, because it was started May 1st, 1776, and it did its job. It created a wave of revolution through the world. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the revolutions in South America that kicked out the Spanish Empire. And I think they even worked the Italian unification and the German unification, because they wanted larger countries so they could have central banks and get those countries in debt. Italy was a bunch of different kingdoms. Germany was a bunch of different kingdoms and principalities. And what they did was they rolled out, all the national pride and the nationalism just to make people in their tribes feel important. But they were getting fucked. So, yeah, to be generous, maybe the middle of the 1800s, 1870s, Italian unification. It was done by them. And it's like in the Born Identity where, Treadstone gets closed, but all the personnel, the resources, the know-how, the technology just gets shifted to a new label. So at the end of the Born Identity, Treadstone becomes Blackbriar, and then it starts becoming Larks, a whole bunch of other different things as the Born series continues. So yeah, it's like do your fucking homework, stuff like that, and the truthers too. They'll have you believe that they know exactly who's running the world, and they can name these people and give you family histories, and it's like anybody who can be named is a nobody in the grand scheme. They're just middle management, and there are 100 people who can replace any one of them. So, you see these dingbats with these like 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, and here's their names. I know exactly who they are. They're full of shit. And then too, it's like they call anything that's not Orthodox Christianity Satanism. And they call paganism Satanism, which is complete bullshit, because paganism was never evangelical. And evangelical religions, the way they became the dominant religions in the world today, so we're talking Christianity, Islam, and even Buddhism, these evangelical religions became the most common and the predominant religions because they killed so many people in order to establish monopolies. And really, there were banks behind all these religions, these evangelical religions with the true word of God or whatever the fuck. There were banks behind them who wanted to set up trading blocks. So Christian Europe was like the first European Union, and its purpose was to dominate the western end of the Silk Road. And they actually stole the Silk Road trade from the Scandinavians. So the Scandinavians, aka the Vikings and the dragon ships, they used to take the Silk Road goods from the Black and Caspian Seas at the western edge of the Silk Road, and they'd ship everything through the rivers through Russia to the Baltic Sea. They'd take it home to Scandinavia. Then they'd send it all south down into, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the Mediterranean. Christianity wanted to capture that Silk Road trade. So once they did that, the Scandinavians were out of a livelihood. And so they started attacking the churches in Western Europe and Christian Europe because they were basically being impoverished by this investment bank that started Christianity. So anyway, that's a whole tangent. But these autistic truthers they're trained by this Abrahamic Islamo-Christian way of thinking. So, anyway, getting back to the main point here, this is going to be a bellyachy month here in December. People are going to have bellyaches. They're going to be getting angry. There's going to be a bunch of fear porn. Just what I tell you this month, keep you cool, hold on. Now, people within, the global elite have been throwing around this whole thing about this winter being a dark winter. Well, there's some truth to that. People who've had the needlecraft, who've had the holy anointing of the needlecraft, a lot of them are going to get sick this winter. But it may not be actually until the following. So we're talking like November, December 2023 and into 24, where people are really getting sick. It may take that long for that whole thing really to ultimately set in. I don't wish that upon anyone, but we live in a world of cause and effect. So, and I say that because by then, it's like November 2023, Rahu and Ketu are going to change signs. So Rahu is going to go to Pisces. Ketu, which signifies liberation, death, liberation from this 3D world, it's going into Virgo, which is disease, illness, medicines, poisons, the whole healthcare system. So, losses in health. Ketu in Virgo, it's trained through Virgo, would signify. So, the big wave might not be till then, but definitely this winter, you're going to see people getting sick. A lot of people getting sick. I think it's going to, just burden the system, slow things down. More shortages, but not major shortages. So a lot of the truther, the Asperger autistic truther, prepper crowd, they're going to start telling you that this is like the big starvations here. Well, there's no mega death in the astrology. The mega death of our time, it's past. It was like 1998 through like 2005, 2006. Places in the world, people will have severe food shortages, but, and that's extremely unfortunate. But all in all in the world, especially here in the West, we're going to be inconvenienced. But that's the thing here in the West. We are quite wimpy. Just growing up, I always just felt like, the men were like pretty much castrated. And they were kind of passive aggressive. And then the women were, also powerless in their own way, which made them passive aggressive and controlling. And, I think part of the disempowerment that's common to men and women is we don't have any challenges. And so it just makes us fixate on the smallest little thing. And we want to control everything because we don't have any struggle to challenge us and to give us vitality. So any little inconvenience, the point is, any little inconvenience becomes a catastrophe. So this month, especially with this this full moon on December 7th, you're going to see some some setbacks in the food supply. There are going to be things you can't get a hold of, but like what else is new? For almost 3 years we've been living this. So it's a little more of the same, but now it's at Christmas time. People are going to get dramatic. And with this Mars retrograde going sidereally, started what? It was like 0 or 1 degree Gemini. It's back in Taurus now. Whole thing takes place in Gemini tropical. So Mars retrograde, it deals with setbacks and also deals with things we were angry about but weren't expressing coming to the surface. So for tropical, for Gemini, it's going to be anger in the media coming up. Things that people did not express their anger about. We're going back, reviewing, and expressing the anger. Sidereally, with most of it taking place in Taurus, this is going to be setbacks in terms of wealth, money, and then resources and food. But, it's not the mega death that people have kind of been hoping for, And that's the thing, too, is something that's common to human beings, and it's on a spectrum. Some people have a lot of it. Some people have barely any. Is a death wish. We all have this like unconscious self-sabotage and a death wish. So people through the Cold War, for example, they fantasized about nuclear war with the Soviets and the world getting destroyed. The whole Islamo-Christian era, the book of Revelations, it's a bunch of fear porn about the end of the world. Every year since, Revelations was part of the canon, people have been fantasizing about the fucking rapture. And the thing is the rapture and, a third of the world dying and all this shit and the fucking flaming sword coming out of Jesus's mouth and, Satan doing a dance on the earth. That is actually easier than having to be independent and make your own decisions and be your own leader. It's easier to have the fucking rapture than it is to get a life. So that's why people have been fantasizing about the fucking rapture for what? 1,700 years, 1,500 years? Well, it's not coming. You're going to have to deal with yourself. You're going to have to deal with getting a life and telling yourself what to do. Because the age of gurus is over. So, it's like I'm always saying, it's like Jesus and Donald Trump aren't going to fucking get installed in the White House by Christmas, nor will Bernie Sanders and the resurrected Martin Luther King be installed in the White House by Christmas. The gurus aren't coming to save you. You're going to have to fucking get a life, save yourself. So, yeah, so the death wish. And, this whole, the Wuhan cooties crisis and the sacred anointing of the needlecraft. It was like this, it was this, for a lot of people, not all of us, but for those who ran out to get the anointing of the needlecraft, it was like this gleeful event. Part of this is because, especially with the baby boom, especially the men, they were raised to believe that they could be heroes by proxy because they're mummies and daddies that supposedly won World War II. Even though, in the grand scheme, America and Britain only fought about 5-10% of World War II. But, through mass media, they came to believe that because their parents were heroes, they were heroes because they can watch World War II movies and cheerlead for the Allies. And they think that, being a good citizen is like sitting on your ass on the couch, cracking a beer, pouring a fucking whiskey or whatever, taking a hit off of a bowl and watching the news and cheerleading the correct party. So it's completely fucking delusional. So this whole Wuhan cooties crisis and the sacred holy anointing of the needlecraft, it made a lot of people feel like they were heroes because they were like part of some World War II type thing, and it's like dementia Joe Biden's talking about, we're fighting a COVID war. Well, that was a lot of that was a psyop to get the baby boom on board and help them to think that they're just as heroic as their, World War II generation parents. So, a bunch of fucking nonsense. But it invoked the death wish. And I think, too, with the anointing of the holy needlecraft, people unconsciously, subconsciously and unconsciously, they couldn't tell you this, but subconsciously and unconsciously, they feel the despair of the American dream, where your whole purpose to living is to be the man or the woman who owns everything. I couldn't possibly shop for that person because he or she owns everything. What do I buy him? It's like, that was the aspiration. That became like the purpose for living, and that's fucking depressing. So people could sense this, like, if you just follow the normie, like, American and Western world life path, it's like your whole purpose is to just work so you can buy more shit and get into more debt and get a bigger house and clog your house with more shit and get a bigger car. And as your body and mind start failing as you get older, there's no consideration of, well, why don't I make my body and mind healthier and sharper and master it? It's like, no, just fill your house with more shit, get a bigger car, you'll feel more secure. So deep down, people just felt like the American dream is a pit of despair, which I believe it largely to be. So, because it's taken wildly out of context. So, yeah, people, I think they were titillated by the death wish because they were like, well, all I'm living for is to work so I can buy more shit and make my credit card company and the manufacturers even richer. Yeah, I think I'll be a lab rat because, maybe I'll die and I'll get a break from this shit. So, yeah. The death wish was definitely a factor here. So, yeah. I lost my original thread a little bit. So we're going to roll from here. So anyway. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the point is, yeah. The rapture, the mega death, the big truther prepper starvation, it's not coming. It's inconvenience. And again, we've been raised to expect convenience around every corner. So it feels like a disastrous tragedy when our convenience is shaken. But, it'll be fine. What I suggest to people, before this full moon on the 7th, go just stock up on some nutrient-dense food, not necessarily like survival staples, but just things you don't want to be without, especially at Christmas time. So I don't know. I don't even know what normal people make at Christmas time anymore. Go get some butter, stock up on the eggs. That stuff, lasts a long ass time in the fridge. Put some meat in the freezer. You can store potatoes and stuff like that in a cold place. Carrots. Grab some of that stuff. Chocolate. Things like that, treats you want on the holidays. Get your booze. I don't recommend buying all the rubbing alcohol and sanitary wipes because you're not going to need those. If you run out of toilet paper, just wash your ass. I never understood the toilet paper crisis. If you got soap and water, you can do a better job than toilet paper. It's like I always said to people, do you wash your dishes with dry paper towels or do you wash them? So anyway, yeah, don't make a run on the toilet paper. Just get some things you don't want to be without for the holiday celebration. Shit's going to be fine. But I will say, economy's going to drag, I think, through the winter into the spring, into like April, maybe even May. Because Mars is like shit slow. So, sidereally, with this Mars retrograde spending most of its time in Taurus, from a sidereal visible sky perspective, it's going to stay in Taurus until the 13th of March. So that's a lot of time in Taurus. When was that in November? Let me look up that retrograde information. Where are you, Mars? Yeah, October the 30th. It went into retrograde within a few days, beginning of November. It was in Taurus, sidereal. So was that November, December, January, February. Yeah, it's like 4.5 months in Taurus, sidereally. And in the case of tropical, it's all those months in Gemini. So Gemini is also trade because it's ruled by Mercury. Mercury's travel. So yeah, I think the economy is going to drag till April, May, and then it's going to have a nice little bounce back. But we're still in this whole thing where it's going to take about 20 years, I think, for the money system to really change over, because basically Saturn and Pluto are going to have to meet up in the latter degrees of Capricorn. So that's gonna take some time. Actually, let me see. I take that back. They're gonna meet up in Aquarius because they met once in the early degrees of Capricorn. Yeah. So in about 30 years, they're going to meet up again in Aquarius because Saturn takes about 30 years to go around. So I think for around 30 years, we're going to be in a weird in-between space. So many people are just like, again, the truthers are like, well, the cryptocurrency is going to come online any day now, and the Federal Reserve is going to get torched, and it's going to be financial freedom by Christmas. It's like, no, we're probably about 30 years with that. But government as we know it is going to fall. There can be a big institutional collapse, I think, by 2027. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm getting so off topic, it's not funny. So yeah, this Mars retrograde, the economy's going to drag some ass, just difficulty shipping food. Another thing too here in December is and into January, there's like a squeeze going on in Capricorn. So you've got you've got Saturn to begin the month at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So signs are 30 degrees wide. So Saturn, 26 degrees, it's coming towards that end of the sign. And I think it's causing a squeeze. It's like the trash compactor in Star Wars, right? So inside the boundaries of Capricorn, you've got hierarchy, government, authority, even the financial system, especially for America because Capricorn's the second house of resources. Politicians, business leaders, all those kind of people. And Saturn moving through Capricorn, the trash compactor is getting tighter. And then on January 17th, Saturn goes on to its other home sign, Aquarius. So there's a big squeeze going on here. And I think, it's like the whole system's not going away, but it's losing credibility. And some politicians and other types of leaders are going to get their hands caught in a cookie jar. Hopefully some of this rampant pedophilia that the world has been running on for generations comes to light here. As well as, the other types of corruption. But it's like, Christ, the pedophilia is everywhere. It's like, the more people I get to know, it's like there's like one in every family. It's crazy. People will swear that there's none in their family. It's like, no, everybody's got one. So, and I think in positions of power, especially the Vatican being so old, it's like a rite of passage for people who want to promote. And there's almost like the secret societies. I think one of their holy sacraments is dominance. And something like pedophilia, it's an act of dominance. So there's a lot of things that could potentially come to light, but I'm not holding my breath for any of them because, the mass of people only give a shit about silly things. So this whole thing about, all the people are going to be woken up. It's like, yeah, good luck. But a critical mass will wake up. So yeah, you got the trash compactor going on in officialdom. Yeah, the old order is slowly being cleaned. All right. So interesting thing here, December 1st to the 5th. So there's a mutual exchange going on. So sidereally. So you've got Mars in Taurus, you've got Venus in Scorpio. So they're in each other's signs. So basically, it's like they're house sitting for each other. So they're basically at home. So they're both very strong. So even though we have this Mars retrograde and is disrupting trade and shipping and, food distribution, for this first week anyway, it's not so bad because, again, Venus and Mars are house sitting and they won't let anything in each other's houses, be destroyed really. So, yeah, it brings some stability, sense of well-being. It can be a good time to mend relationships. Yeah. What's the other thing? Now, yeah, let's go back to this this full moon here. So full moon. Oh Christ, these notes are a mess. I'll do my best. Full moon, 21 degrees of Taurus in the sidereal, about 11 p.m. here on the east coast of North America. 21 degrees of Taurus. So this takes place in the lunar mansion. The Vedic name is Rohini. The Western name is Pasiphae. Pasiphae, mythologically, one of the children of Helios, the physical sun. And this Pasiphae, this goddess, would reflect her father's light. So the reflector of the sun is by default the moon. So she's a lunar goddess. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and especially in this lunar mansion of Pasiphae, aka Rohini. That's its favorite place in Taurus. In exaltation, it's where like a planet is like a celebrity. It's where a planet feels intoxicated, where they feel really good. So it's not home, but they feel great. They get the royal treatment. So the moon here can be a real diva because Taurus is all about materiality, sensuality. It's all about having the best and accepting nothing less than the best. So the moon here can be a real diva. Now, this moon is conjunct Mars perfectly, same degree, just a matter of, I think, seconds apart. So, and seconds, by that I mean a fraction of a degree, because degrees are made of minutes and seconds. So, very close to each other, there's Mars and moon. So, you get the moon, again, exalted in Taurus, and especially exalted in Pasiphae. So, you've already got a diva moon. It's conjunct with a retrograde Mars. It's going to get very angry about things that happened in the past. So, great source of anger in this context. People getting angry about how the Wuhan cooties crisis was handled by governments and corporations, which then precipitated the logistics problems, the food shortages, the inflation, all that stuff. So that's pretty interesting. And then when you look at the tropical, where this full moon is taking place, conjunct with Mars, this retrograde Mars, it's a lunar mansion of Typhon. So Typhon, mythologically, was a sea monster. So, and it deals with destruction. So it's like, destruction of trade and shipping, and people are angry about that. Now, a thing about full moons, there are oppositions between sun and moon. So basically, opposition, it's when planets are in opposite signs, but at the same degree, which is what every full moon is. So for a full moon, it's when the moon is receiving and reflecting the full light of the sun. So the sun is over in Scorpio. It's over in a constellation called Jeshta. So Jeshta is, and then the Western name is Parka. So Jeshta Parka, they're very, this is like the most wild and kind of unstable energy of Scorpio. So this is like, it's like a vain person who can be very paranoid. So it's basically like the people who run the world. And an example I heard from KRS Astrology, it's like somebody's like walking somewhere and they fall down a hole that they can't get out of. And if a passerby comes and looks into the hole, before they can even ask if they need help, that person who's fallen down, they feel embarrassed and ridiculed because they're in that situation. So before the Good Samaritan can even offer help, they're basically looking up and saying, I'm going to get my revenge on you, even though that person didn't do that to them. So it's like the batshit crazy part of Scorpio. So that's the energy coming from the sun. So batshit crazy Scorpio energy being beamed onto a diva moon who's like fully reflecting it, who's conjunct with an angry retrograde Mars. So people are going to get angry, and I think it's going to be all about the logistics and the food supply and all that stuff. And it's not because it's going to be so severe and tragic and calamitous. It's going to be because Christmas is coming, and they want to bake a bunch of stuff and make food, and they're not going to be able to get a hold of it. And all through this whole month, we still have, Rahu and Uranus near each other in Aries, sidereally, Taurus, tropical. So Rahu and Uranus. So Rahu is expanding, the north node of the moon, Rahu, Loki, Lucifer, expanding Uranus, the disruptor, the rebel. So disrupting leadership and disrupting what's going on in our heads, Aries, and in Taurus, it's disrupting the world of resources and food and materiality and, money and all that stuff. So, and sidereally with the lunar mansion of Hades is making us deal with things we don't want to deal with, because Hades is the god of the underworld. And then, we got a couple of Gandantas in other news. We have a couple of Gandantas going on this month. So December the 5th, what is it? Venus goes Gandanta. So Gandanta is when a planet changes from a water sign to a fire sign. So it basically causes steam, causes emotional pressure, make people a little crazy. So Venus goes from 29 Scorpio to 0 degrees Sagittarius. And it does this every year, so it's nothing particularly special. But, with everything else going on, it can make people kind of like just have difficulty relating to each other and getting along. And then, December 14th, like it does every year, Sun goes from Gandanta, from Scorpio to Sagittarius. So, this is before the winter solstice, darkest time of the year. People can get a little stir crazy. All right, so let's move on. New moon. So, let me see here. Yeah, it's a new moon, sidereal, 7 degrees of Sagittarius. What is that, 24? 1 degree of Capricorn, tropical. So, yeah. This is, basically this new moon. Well, this is an interesting one. As an American, this takes place in America's ascendant house. So I think what this really does is it can basically, I think for this Christmas time, it can kind of put a damper on the Christmas spirit, because, new moons, basically what happens is the shadow of the earth keeps the rays of the sun from reaching the moon. So the moon is in darkness. The moon is the mind. The moon is the emotional self. So we can feel basically like emotionally gloomy and depressed and all that stuff. So interesting, interesting to have so close to Christmas. And it's in these 3 days where this, from our perspective in the northern hemisphere, the sun sits at that southernmost point. And this is why, in the biblical mythology, they say that Jesus died for 3 days and was resurrected. Well, the sun, from our perspective in the northern hemisphere, after the midsummer's day, the summer solstice, the sun keeps going farther and farther south. On the 21st of December, it goes to its southernmost point, and it sits there on the 22nd, 23rd, 24th. It's dead for 3 days. On the 25th, it's resurrected. It starts moving north again, and it heralds the coming of summer. So this is why Jesus was said to have died for 3 days and resurrected, and this is why his birth is celebrated at Christmas, because Jesus is a sun god. And his stories are taken literally by the mainstream of Christianity. Jesus is a story of the soul and of the sun. It's an allegorical, symbolic story. So it's like the dark time. So this new moon takes place at the darkest time of the year. So I think people are going to be more introspective than usual. They're not going to be taken in so much by the distraction. In celebrating Christmas can be a really fun distraction, don't get me wrong. But it's something that puts your focus and your intent and your attention into the external world. I think this Christmas, people are going to be more turned inward. They're going to be like, what's going on in this world? What's going on in my life? How can I change it? And that's a big thing. You have to change your own life. The rapture's not coming. And what else about this new moon? During this new moon, we've got a slow Mercury. Mercury's getting ready to station in retrograde for the end of the month. A thing too, by this new moon, Mars retrogrades back to 16 degrees Taurus. It's going to station at 15 degrees Taurus on December the 30th. So in another week, it'll stop and station. So by 16 degrees Taurus, Mars is conjunct with one of the royal stars, Aldebaran, which sidereally is at 14 Taurus. So it's the royal star, and it deals with all things Taurus. So wealth, sensuality, pleasure, materiality, money, fame. But think about Aldebaran. It's like things you can't hold on to. It's like how, a lot of celebrities, actors, musicians, and so forth, politicians, you're hot for a few years, and then you're not hot anymore. The next big thing comes up, and you kind of fade into the background. So it's about, Aldebaran deals with all of these wealth and fame and resources and all these things people want that they can't hold on to. It's like a Rahu kind of an energy where it eludes your grip. You can grab it for a second, but you can't hold it forever. So definitely that kind of a thing dawning on people, even if it's only, subconscious and unconscious. So then moving on, we get a Mercury retrograde starting this month. So 29th of December, Mercury goes retrograde. And let me see here. Sidereally, it goes retrograde at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So tropically, what is that? 24 Capricorn. It's going to go back sidereally to 13 Sagittarius. So what is that tropically? 17 plus. So it's going to go. So tropically, it's going to go from 24 Capricorn to 7 Capricorn. So the way I look at this, Mercury is going to start retrograde in Capricorn, and it's 0 degrees. 0 is the miracle degree. That and 29 degrees are the miracle degrees. Miracle degree because 0 and 29 degrees, they basically have infinite potential energy on tap. And when conjunctions, placements in birth charts, stations, all that kind of thing. Eclipses happen at 0 degrees. Really amazing things can happen. So Mercury sidereally is going to start 0 Capricorn. It's going to go back into Sagittarius. So Capricorn, again, officialdom, hierarchy, politicians, government, officials of all types, goes back to Sagittarius. Sagittarius deals with the truth, the facts, deals with philosophy, science, spirituality, religion. But it's this drive to state the facts and tell the truth. So I think it's basically going to grab that Capricorn energy. It's going to grab government and officialdom and hierarchy, drag it back into Sagittarius, and start dropping some bombs about what they've been up to. So that's pretty interesting. Interesting Mercury retrograde. From that tropical perspective, it's all in Capricorn. So changes our thinking about, just government in general. But from that sidereal perspective, where it goes back to Sagittarius, helps us to see the truth about who these people and these institutions really are. So let me get this straight here. So sidereally, Mercury starts its retrograde in the lunar mansion of Natura. So Natura, goddess of the natural world that makes nature bloom and flower, has a lot to do with healing. And then at the end of its retrograde, when it's back at 13 Sagittarius, it ends in Hecate. So this goddess, this moon goddess who can travel into the underworld. And it's fun. So Natura ruled by the sun, Hecate ruled by the moon. So we're basically Natura to facilitate healing and correction in kind of rebirth. It's gonna basically start us on a journey, and she's gonna hand us off to Hecate, who's gonna lead us into the underworld and show us what's been going on. Truth about government, hierarchy, officialdom, officials, leaders, all those kind of people. From a tropical perspective, the Mercury retrograde starts in the lunar mansion of the Muses and ends in Natura. So the Muses, goddesses of creativity, of writers, speakers, musicians, artists, people who create, true artists. They don't just create pretty things. They have a message, and they convey it through their medium of choice. So there will be messages, muses, that will start facilitating some sort of healing, Natura. So pretty interesting. And then finally we come to the end of the month, near the end of the month, the 30th of December. This is when Mars stations. So this is when Mars stands still, gets ready to go direct, start moving forward from our perspective on Earth. So sidereally again, 15 degrees of Taurus. So it's 1 degree from, again, Aldebaran, one of the royal stars that creates the Royal Cross. So, and again, Aldebaran, it does deal with fame, wealth, sensuality, pleasure, resources, money. And it's like, the energy of it is that you can enjoy these things, but you can't hang on to them. It's that celebrity where you're hot for a little while and then you're old news. So that's definitely the feeling, again, we're getting from this Mars retrograde, is that, the convenience that we've been raised in will elude us to a degree. Mars, tropically, Mars stations 9 degrees Gemini. So, it's interesting because, again, this Mars retrograde sidereally dealt mostly with the resources, the food, the money. Tropically, it dealt more with the shipping, the trade, media, all that stuff. So, and then it takes, Mars is going to be, it's got to cross through the shadow degrees, the degrees it retrograded through. See if I have that noted. That's going to take quite some time. Yeah, that's into March, yeah, about March 13th. Now, last little kind of, where's my water? There it is. Last, more substantial tidbit. Mars hasn't had a retrograde through these degrees since 1990, 1991. That was an important time. So, 1990, 91, that was a real sort of shift in the world order. So, 1990, 91, we had the recession here in the States. Just going to get back to my notes. I made some detailed notes about this. I don't know where the hell I put them. But yeah, we had a recession here in the U.S. We went bankrupt. Really, the U.S. went bankrupt. They had to do some reshuffling. Soviet Union went bankrupt, but the Soviet Union didn't have so many resources at its disposal. And it was interesting, the Russian people really got fucked by communism. And the Russian people, especially like a Vladimir Putin, they're still angry about how Wall Street installed communism in the form of the Soviet Union in their country. So basically the Russian leaders and the Russian people chose not to allow the Soviet Union to refinance its mortgage. So then through the 1990s, they had to burn their forests because they couldn't afford oil and gas. So, yeah, around that time, both of these superpowers, after the arms race of the Cold War, went bankrupt. But the U.S. had a better network. So what did the U.S. do? The U.S. convinced basically the OPEC countries, so the Gulf oil states, minus Iran, well, maybe including Iran. A lot of shady shit goes on, even though our politicians act like they're enemies. They do a lot of deals together. So a lot of these Gulf oil states bought 10% of the U.S. banking stocks, particularly Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. So they were convinced to buy 10% of the U.S. banking stocks. Now, they didn't park their money on Wall Street for free. There was a price to that. And they did these power-hungry Arab royals, they did a Don Corleone. And they were like, well, I'm going to call upon you to do me a service in exchange. So the service that they called in was Gulf War I. So the invasion of, it was Desert Storm, where the U.S. and its coalition sent all those troops into Saudi Arabia, rolled into Kuwait, rolled into southern Iraq, basically slapped Saddam Hussein on the wrist. Well, what had been going on with Saddam Hussein was the Kuwaitis were actually doing what's called slant drilling. So there was a border between Kuwait and Iraq, but the Kuwaitis were drilling basically diagonally through the border into Iraqi territory. And oil drilling takes place on a large scale. They go down thousands of feet. So the Iraqis could tell their oil fields are being drained, and they told the Kuwaitis, stop doing this. And the Kuwaitis were like, well, we're not doing it. And then the Iraqis said, no, here's the evidence. And they were like, well, fuck you, we're not going to stop. So that's why Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And there was all this propaganda that his soldiers were going to maternity wards and hospitals and murdering babies. And, it was complete fucking nonsense. It was justification and go to war. So basically, these Gulf oil states wanted to get away with stealing Iraqi oil. So once Kuwait was invaded, they wanted the Americans and their buddies to come in and teach Saddam a lesson. And that's what happened. So, yeah, basically the U.S. banks got a bailout and they had to repay it by going to war. And then, the Balkans kicked off. Yugoslavia broke up. Communism fell in Poland. The year, 89, just before that. East Germany. Well, Germany was reunified. So East and West Germany became Germany once again. So, yeah, a lot of those were big years. But, Balkanization was a big theme. So Tito, what's his name? Was it Franz Tito, or was it, I think it was Joseph Tito? I think it was Joseph Tito. He was the dictator who ruled Yugoslavia. Kept both the Soviets and the Americans out of Yugoslavia. Pretty amazing. He was one of these non-aligned leaders in a non-aligned country. So without his leadership, Yugoslavia fell apart. They started fighting over territory. And then the Serbians got blamed for all the war crimes because they didn't want to let Bank of America and McDonald's and, all these American companies come in and start pumping their propaganda and, getting Serbian society on the road to, sex changes for 6-year-olds. So, yeah, so I think in our world, within the next few years, we're going to see some balkanization. I think countries are going to break up. And a lot of countries need divorces, in my opinion. So, yeah, to wrap this all up, it'll be a bellyachy month. Don't believe the fear porn. Just wait. And, good things have already happened. It's like the COVID restrictions are basically gone at this point. And those of us who waited and didn't get the holy anointing via the needlecraft, we're in a pretty good place. So don't believe the fear of porn and check your temper. And that's about it. And if you have not had a reading with me and you're curious about that, I highly recommend it. Astrology readings, rune readings, even the I Ching. These are methods and tools to gaining more awareness of your life, of how your mind works, how your psychology works, and where you stand in the different situations in your life. So yeah, check me out. That's about it. Have a good one. I'll be coming back to you soon.